Scott Budden is a partner at Orchard Point Oysters, some of the tastiest oysters you're going to find in Maryland. And I'm happy to welcome him to the COSS stage. Thank you.
Go, man.
Thanks, Tanner. All right. Looks like we have our panel assembled here. I'm going to go through and just introduce everybody, and then I think Steve's going to lead us off here with his presentation. So the title of panel 3 is Briny New World, Incredible Advances in Oyster Tech. We have Steve Pattinson here, we have Stephanie Westby, and we have Don Webster. So Steve is with Solar Oysters, Stephanie's with NOAA, and Don Webster's with the University of Maryland Extension. So without further ado, we're going to get Steve up here. I'm going to try to do a quick one sentence about each person's project or what they're going to speak on. So for Steve, it's very interesting. The Solar Oyster project has taken the concept, I think, of automation, of raising oysters, and actually put it into practice. It's very interesting that you talk to other growers in industry, and they're often like, we don't have a combine. We don't have that industrial piece of equipment that's really a game changer. So I'll let him speak to that. But to me, what he's done is very impressive, and it reminds me of that potentially game-changing piece of equipment. So, Steve.
Well, thank you, Scott. All right. Well, I want to thank Tanner and his team for the opportunity to be here today. I know some of you are familiar with solar oysters, but for those that are not, let me give you a little bit of background. So Solar Oysters as a company was formed in the middle of 2019. And the goal of the company was to build what we think is a pretty innovative, unique technology, which you see here in this photo, called the Solar Oyster Production System. And what this is, it's a floating oyster production technology that uses solar energy to power or automate the grow process. As shown here in the small diagram to the upper right, and there is, if you go to our website, solaroysters.com, there is a 2-minute animated video that shows you the technology. So what we've built is a 40 by 25 foot prototype. And again, to stress, this is a prototype, the intent being to really test this technology, see how viable it is, and take it from there. So we were very fortunate. Again, we're all here today about partnerships. We were very fortunate to partner with CBF, and we helped them with their oyster gardening program through a grant from the Abel Foundation. And we accepted spat-on-shell oysters in the fall of 2021 and did the same thing in 2022. And we've achieved what we feel are some good milestones and success. So some attributes of this technology, again, it's a small footprint. I think all of you that have to go through the permitting process can appreciate that compared to a traditional float farm. This particular design goes down the bottom of what we call where the baskets are suspended below the platform. We refer to those as ladders. So the bottom of these ladders are about 16 feet. This was located again in the Baltimore Harbor at a moored to a pier at a depth of about 20 feet to the bottom of the harbor there. We had, in addition to the spat-on-shell diploid oysters, again, because the whole intent is to try to prove this technology, we also purchased some triploid seed, some 6mm seed that we grew for those 2 years. The solar energy, again, is used to automate this process. As you see here in the lower right, this is looking down into one of the wells where the ladders are. There's 5. These are SEPA baskets, off-the-shelf SEPA baskets. 5 ladders. The total capacity is for this particular design is 575 baskets. And we estimate that could grow perhaps up to 150 to 200,000 oysters in a year. The solar energy, there's enough power to not only automate that process, but also for navigation lighting. If you need to put on surveillance equipment, because the intent would be this would be put out somewhere, perhaps potentially in a remote area. Ship to shore communication. You could have water quality monitoring equipment and other things. Obviously, one of the benefits of something like this, it's a trade-off. It is a higher capital cost up front, but there is the labor savings. So what happened to our middle photo there? So anyway, I wanted to show you some of the oysters that were grown. So again, this was comparing, not sure what happened to that image there, but we achieved, again, the seed within about 12 months, we were able to grow oysters up to about 2.5 to 3 inches. Here's some additional photos. There's ones of the seed on the left and spat-on shell here to the right. Again, the spat-on shell that was grown, as I said, was part of the CBF's oyster gardening program. The spat-on shell was eventually outplanted to the reef at the mouth of the Baltimore Harbor and near Fort Carroll. And as I mentioned, one of the attributes of this is the ability to rotate these cages. And what we're showing here, as we all know, biofouling is a major issue for farms. It's a huge issue in terms of labor. So what we're showing here is, and what we did, we kept one ladder static just for kind of comparative purposes compared to other ladders that were rotating. And so what we did, we kept, as shown here on the right, a ladder static for an entire week. And then we had another ladder rotating without any spray washing or power washing. And you can see the difference in the biofoul just from the rotation. The platform can be programmed at different rotation rates. Last year, or when this was taken, the rate we had set was about every 12 minutes it would move. So that meant that a full cycle for a full ladder went through at about 4.5 hours. So that meant that a basket was exposed to the sun for about an hour a day. And I think one of the things we learned from that was that may have been too quick, because we think that we could have gotten more growth if we'd let the oysters kind of sit for a while so they would open up and feed. Again, it's all part of having a prototype and testing it. But we did, we did get some really good results. Now, for this past year, we had a little bit shortened grow season for a number of reasons. We did purchase about 65,000 seed. We didn't get them on the platform until actually around second week of May, and they were off-boarded third week of September for reasons I'll get into in a few minutes. But we did, again, have more spat-on shell this past year. We had to offload them due to the conditions of our grant by the end of June. But with CBF, we came up with an estimate that we grew and outplanted again to the reef within 2 years, about 400,000 spat-on shell from the platform. And again, that was only using about a third of the capacity of the platform. And again, these were, again, seed oysters, triploids that we grew this year. They got up to, this is during a culling event, but they got up to about 1.5 inches in 4.5 months. We were very fortunate to be awarded an innovation award. And the way our proposal was, and the award, the project was to implement an automated spray wash system, which was a feature of the platform that we'd always envisioned. So we're very fortunate to get that award. We installed it on one ladder, and a few lessons learned from that was that, and again, to stay within budget, what we did was we used 2 pumps in tandem. And again, as shown here, we have a schedule 80 gauge PVC pipe with the spray nozzles. The good thing is it worked. I mean, again, all powered by solar energy. Lessons learned from this, I think, moving forward as we make upgrades to the platform, are that, we probably put in just a single pump. We reused some nozzles here that had an angle of about 40 degrees. We probably put on nozzles that had a wider spread. And we would definitely probably use, rather than a PVC material, probably some pipe, some metal to enable it for greater water flow. The 2 pumps had ability to pump about 25 gallons a minute. And then we were probably, again, moving forward with this kind of an attribute or feature to the system, have it set up perhaps so that you had these brackets over each ladder, and then the spray wash wand, if you will, would be removable, that an operator could then move it over a ladder whenever they needed to do spray washing. So just to summarize what we've learned over those 2 years, as I indicated, we used off-the-shelf SEPA baskets. I'm sure you're very familiar with that design with the clips. We used those to start out with. We found that rotation, as the baskets came to the apex of that circle, if you will, that was kind of a violent action, if you will. And so we had a few baskets detached. So we came up with a design. We worked with SEPA with a new attachment mechanism specifically for this platform. As I showed you, we've looked at the biofouling, and again, the rotation is very beneficial in reducing biofouling. We did test the automated spray wash system, as I mentioned, and again, From a growth standpoint, we had very high survivability, both on the spat on shell and the seed oysters, which is very promising. We still want to look at the varying rotation speeds. Again, as I said, we felt that the growth we got, particularly for this location, again, it was in the harbor. Some of you have been there, but I think as we can all recognize, the Baltimore Harbor is not the best place to grow oysters, but we felt that we had pretty good success. And by the way, we had an open house that we invited a number of leading growers here in Maryland or Virginia last December, and several of those folks are here today. And we opened up a few oysters because the growers wanted to see what they look like, and I think we got some nods and some favorable impressions. We did condition indexing on the oysters, and the oysters that we had on the rotating ladders had a much higher condition index than the one on the static ladder, which was positive. So what are we doing next year? And we were very excited about 2024. This is not the Baltimore Harbor. So this is at Hooper Island Oyster Company. And we're very excited because we feel that we've pretty much have done what we can do or need to do when we had it in Baltimore Harbor. But we have entered into a partnership with Jordan and Johnny Shockley with Blue Oyster Environmental. And we will be making some upgrades to the platform this winter with the goal that we will be putting it out on one of their leases. We'll get a lease amendment, or they'll get a lease amendment. But we really are at a point where we really need to show that this can work on an actual farm. And that's kind of what we intend to do for 2024. And we're pretty excited about that possibility. Again, do some more metrics, track energy use, further assessment of the biofoul control system, so on and so forth. So again, we moved this on September 29th, which is one of the reasons why we didn't have as long of a growth season up in the harbor this year as the prior year. So just two final comments I wanted to make. We have, it's estimated in the U.S. we have a seafood trade deficit of about somewhere around $16 to $18 billion a year. About something like 70 to 80% of all the seafood that we eat in the U.S. is from overseas. There's something like 60 to 70% of all the estuaries in the U.S. have nutrient impairments, which everybody here in this room knows the impact of that. So the point is that, oysters really have a key role in helping address those challenges. And we think that this is a technology that can help oysters do that. And the last thing I would just say, and I touched on this throughout, we could never have gotten to where we are with this technology and continuing to test it further without partnerships. The Alliance has been very integral in helping us with that. To the lower right, some of you may have been there. The National Shell Fisheries Association had its annual meeting in Baltimore in March, and we worked with the conference organizers, see if they'd make room in their agenda for a tour, and they did. And then we sent out kind of an invite, and we had no idea how many people were going to respond. And then we got like all these signups, and then like, how do we get all these people from the hotel down here? And Tanner came to our rescue and helped us with the logistics, and we ended up having about 65 people that came down in March to take a look at it. So, and others I want to call out that have really helped us. Daryl Anker Carter, who was a graduate student at UMBC's eye care program, did his research on the platform for his master's degree, and it was very helpful, all the data that he acquired, and helped us evaluate the technology. We also collaborated with Blue Water Baltimore, who shared their water quality monitoring data in the harbor. They came and did monitoring right around the platform. So this is truly a collaborative effort, and I just want to thank all the partners that we've worked with and all those that we'll work with in the future. And I would just encourage all of you here today, I met Jordan and Johnny through these meetings, so you just never know where a partnership may lead. So so take advantage of this opportunity. So.
Thank you, Steve. That was a really cool presentation, and was fortunate enough to be one of the growers that got to see it during the open house. It is really a cool piece of technology and equipment. I don't know how it's going to work with seeing it when it's on an actual oyster farm, but I'm sure there'll be some cool marketing coming from that. So, stay tuned, and be awesome to see how it does in the open water on a farm. So thank you, Steve. Next, we have Stephanie Westby with NOAA. She's going to talk to us about a new potential seeding technique for bottom culture and restoration. It involves broadcasting larvae right into the water column. So I remember when I was first getting into growing, somebody said, you know, are you going to put it in cages? Because otherwise it's like throwing $20 bills at the bottom to the bottom of the bay. And I had 10 seconds to talk to her before this, and it sounds like this could be an idea like that, but with some upside. So thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everybody. Stephanie Westby with NOAA. This has been a fantastic symposium so far. Really getting very inspired, learning a lot. So congratulations to the organizers, and I'm thrilled to be up here as part of folks who are doing all this. Let's see if I can help me get to the next presentation.
Oh, excuse me. I messed up. What are we doing? Slideshow from current slide, right? So then
There we go. Thanks. Always with the technical difficulties. Thank you. So a lot of you in this room might recognize this creature up here, and particularly that creature up there. As you all know, this is kind of what we're all after, right? Whether we're here for ecological restoration or aquaculture or wild harvest. There used to be a lot of these, and now there's not a whole lot of them, and we want to get more. And one of the ways, the most typical ways these days that we are doing oyster reef seeding is through hatchery produced juvenile oysters. And I know most of you, a lot of you live and breathe this, and a lot of you familiar with it. But in case you don't, that means spawning them in a hatchery, and then you get these, right? These little pedovelagers or eyed larvae that are just about ready to set. And then drop them in some big tanks with some old dead oyster shell and some water. And if all goes well, you'll get this, which is fat on shell with brandy new little oysters on it. Then you load them onto a barge and put them out onto a reef. And if all goes well, you get something like this in a few years. And that one even has some juvenile oysters on top of the hatchery planted ones. So that's kind of been our bread and butter for the last several decades in terms of how you get oysters onto reefs. If you're lucky and you're building your oyster reef someplace where we have a lot of natural recruitment, you don't have to bother with any of this. Nature kind of takes care of it for you. But if you are in the hatchery game, up in the mid to upper bay in particular, or aquaculture, you need to get your oysters somehow, some way. And NOAA's take on this, the work that I do is primarily in the sanctuaries in the non-harvest areas. So I know things look a little bit different if you're growing these out for aquaculture. But we had this idea. We thought, what would happen if we kind of short-circuited this process in some areas? Not everywhere, because not everywhere is the bottom prepared well enough, and not everywhere in the bay you're going to get the right salinity at the right time period to try this. But in certain circumstances where you do have a nice new reef without a lot of fouling on it, you've got some good reef habitat and you've got good setting conditions, could we take these late stage larvae and deploy them directly onto a reef? And we've come to use the term direct setting for this. And I'll give a spoiler alert. The answer is maybe sometimes, because that's kind of how science works. So first of all, one of the advantages of this is that conceptually, if you look at the as you're looking at it, left-hand side of the screen there, you know, several million eyed larvae can fit into the palm of your hand, right? So theoretically, that should be easier than moving lots of substrate with oysters attached to them out onto the reef. So that gave us hope that maybe this makes a certain amount of sense in terms of economics and ease and materials handling and all of that. But those two are not completely analogous, right? Because the material on the barge, you're not just getting the seed oysters, you're also getting that substrate along with it, right? So that's kind of a 2-for-1. So I'm not trying to sell direct setting as an alternative or a replacement, but rather developing it as an additional tool that may work in some circumstances. So if you have a pre-built reef on the bottom, and maybe you're not so much looking for the substrate, but just the oysters, maybe we could kind of double use the substrate that's put down there, rather than seeding it with spat on shell, where we're getting kind of double substrate, if you will. And you all know seed oysters are precious. Oyster shell in and of itself is precious as well. The other thing is that the beauty of the barge full of spat on shell is that you can plant that in not any salinity, but with a much wider range of salinities. You can go to much fresher salinity than you can with just the eyed larvae. So you can plant in a wider variety of areas, right? So this tool that we are working on developing really has limited uses in some cases, but we're thinking as oyster restoration grows and we increase the number of reefs we're building and the acreages every year, that maybe there'll be more and more of these areas that we might be able to work in. So we thought we'd give it a try. And I know you all heard from Sierra Hildebrand earlier, if she's here. She was involved in this first round of direct setting that we did. And I am realizing I did not even go over my co-authors at the beginning. We've got a great team who has been involved in this. Cecily Stepp from the U.S. Naval Academy has been heavily involved in this. Jason Spires from NOAA and Howard Townsend from NOAA as well. So we got a nice team working on this all together. So back in 2019, we did, sorry, the history of this goes back a lot further, but the recent history of this is that back in 2019, we decided to give this a try in the Avon River in Maryland. And what we did was we zip tied a bunch of shell bags to a cargo net, and we sunk them down to the bottom in an area with good hard substrate on it. And as you can see, we marked a few bags with floats, and then we sent a diver down to open a little capsule of, again, hot larvae, late stage larvae, and very carefully up dump each container right onto one of those marked bags. And we did that four times for each array, and we had 3 of these array. And the idea was like, let's put them on there and see what happens, right? We also deployed alongside of that an ADCP, an acoustic Doppler current profiler, to help us figure out what was going on with the current. While we did this, spoiler, there's really nothing going on in terms of the current on the bottom of the Avon River. In the summertime, we did do our deployment at slack tide just for giggles. Didn't probably matter that much, but now we know. The other thing we did was, this was such a small amount of larvae that we were using for this project that we could, using a technique that Sierra and Jason Spires were very instrumental in developing, we could actually mark them with a fluorescing calcine mark, which sounds great, but you actually have to bring the oyster back into the lab and view it in under a black light. So it's, and the mark only stays the size of the original larvae. So they're hard to find, but for this, we could do that. So we marked the larvae with that, had the diver deploy them, and then several weeks later, pulled them back into the lab to see what we could see, right? And the reason for the calcine marking was just to make sure that, like, the resulting oysters that we're seeing, are they really those same larvae that we point out, or did we get kind of a natural recruitment event that foiled the whole thing? And every oyster, every spat that we found on the bags a few months later and brought back into the lab fluoresced, right? So everything that we found was in fact from those exact larvae. So that was an exciting use of that new tool that Sierra and Jason Spires developed. But the other thing is that 90% of the spat that we found were either on a marked bag or on the bag right next to it. So that gave us comfort that, wow, they actually kind of stay right where you put them. In fact, spreading them out is a little bit of an issue, which really surprised us. So that went great. Then we decided to scale up the whole thing. We said, all right, well, if it works on that scale, let's try to spread them out a little bit more. Let's not go to square meter scale for this one. Let's go to acre scale. So we had a nice new reef in the Avon River that the Army Corps of Engineers had built out of stone that had been already seeded with spat on shell. And we decided to release some larvae on that. We used a different mechanism. This one we affectionately call the Medusa. And the person at the far end of the dock is there with a tank, and through some complicated suction, we're able to siphon the larvae down and out through this manifold mechanism, which is on a benthic sled that we drag behind a boat across a swath of that 2-acre reef, and then left other swaths as controls for that. These, because of the scale of it, we were not able to mark. Oh, and this is just a little bit about you know, what the material of the reef that had been recently built was made out of. And our results are pretty inconclusive. We didn't see a lot of difference between our treated area on this reef and the control patches next to it. We thought maybe we were a little bit too close to the controls. Again, we put the ADCP down there, didn't see a lot of current. We have a couple of theories, but we're not honestly really sure why we didn't see more of a result. However, we did get a natural spat set in the river that year, which is a great thing for the oysters, but kind of a foiling factor for trying to do this kind of work. So again, mixed results on this to date. We've got some current trials going on that we put in the water this summer, some working with the commercial harvest community. We've been working out on Poplar Island. We've got some nice brandy new reefs that we built on the Minokan River that we dropped a lot of larvae onto this year. And we're going to go back in the next few months and start evaluating all of these. But thought it was worth letting you know that we're developing this. If anybody is interested in working with us on this, please, by all means, let me know, reach out. We're all about working with the community, and we're going to try to keep plugging away at this and see if there's any possibility that our hypothesis might be correct, that you can, in some cases, really replicate what nature is doing naturally. Couple caveats on this. Our results, to be honest, have been mixed. I don't think we have this nailed yet. I should also mention that we are conditioning these oysters with water that's been exposed to live oysters to try to give them every opportunity to, every incentive to set, every signal we can find to get them to set. More trials are underway, and you got to keep your larvae happy. People who work with larvae know this. So you don't want to take larvae that was reared in a hatchery at a higher salinity and just kind of toss it someplace with lower salinity. They're just going to die. We don't want to be throwing $20 bills out the bay or $100 bills into the bay. We want to take a little bit of larvae, very carefully, give it every chance to survive, and see if we can nail this technique a little bit better before we go nuts with it, because larvae are very precious. Some people in here spend their days making them, and it is not easy. So I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and look forward to chatting with you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's fascinating stuff. I'd heard some rumblings about this, but this is a great presentation to really break down what you guys are trying to do. So without further ado, we have Don Webster here from University of Maryland. He's going to talk to us about an underwater robot, which I don't know if you have a pet name for. But
how do we get
Right
this
there.
thing off the bottom?
Oh, I don't know if you can, because that's the Zoom, but
Oh, that's what I was looking to see.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you all. It's great to be here. These have been some of the best programs I've been to in my career, which has gone on for a few years. Thank you to CBF and COSS and Tanny. You've done a great job with these all. Thank you. I work for Extension, University of Maryland. It's one of the great jobs in the country. I get to work with real people in the field, try to identify their problems, see what their needs are, find world-class researchers to help solve those problems, and then bring the results back to them through educational programs and materials to help them solve them. I've been with this for a few years. Some of my partners on there, Matt Parker, who's our aquaculture business specialist, one of the best in the country, Alan Patillo, who's the project manager on what I'm going to show you. Okay. Been a lot done to try to revive our industry. We know what's going on with hatchery technology, breeding and genetics, remote setting. My former colleague, Don Merritt, who worked at Horn Point for many years, brought that concept back from the Pacific Northwest. We've been teaching it to our industry ever since. So it's really been a great industry to work in. If you look at farming uses a tremendous amount of technology. We have, farmers don't go out and walk a 2,000 acre cornfield anymore. You put a drone up in an hour, it tells you where the stress points are. We've got agriculture equipment that can be run by computer from miles away. But our industry is somewhere between Amish horse-drawn implements and a 1950 tractor, quite frankly. a few years ago, I was very fortunate. I got contacted by Miao Yu, who is the head of the robotics center at the Clark Engineering College, University of Maryland. She said, we'd like to learn about aquaculture. Could you come up and give us a talk? So I did. I love to talk about aquaculture. I gave them one that covered everything from shellfish to finfish in the bay. Ultimately oceanic aquaculture, what all the things we could do. And Meow called me the next day and she said, we really, really enjoy that. We'd like to start working with some projects. What would you suggest? And we got together and decided we needed to bring technology into bottom culture of oysters. To me, that's where the future is. That's where the big buildup could be for this industry. And we were very fortunate. We put together a project and we got it funded by U.S. Department of Agriculture for a 5-year, $10 million project to develop robotics and advanced technology for oyster aquaculture. We developed a team that's nationwide. We're working both on the East Coast, Gulf Coast, Pacific Coast. The engineers are at the top there. That's the great group I work with. Matt Gray, I'm sorry, right over here. Bobby Hudson, who's with Pacific Shellfish Institute. We now have Southern Mississippi University involved. Jonathan Vincenton with Virginia Tech, who's another economist. Adam Porter with Fraunhofer USA. Fraunhofer, and the extension team at the bottom, myself, Matt Parker, Kathy Liu, who's our seafood tech lady. Willie Lance is our one of our key 4-H people in the University of Maryland, and Yunwei Jen is at UMES, our 1890 component. So this is a nationwide project that's going to bring a lot of technology, hopefully, into this industry. What are we trying to do? One of the first things is we've got to know what's on the bottom. If you're doing bottom culture, how do you currently tell what you have? You go out and you drag a dredge. Wonderful piece of equipment. I'll cover that later. You go out there and you can do a dive study, which takes a lot of time. It's accurate and it costs a lot of money. You can go out and do a Pattinson survey. That, again, that's as accurate as diving, which is very good, but it takes a lot of time and money. We need to come up with better ways to know what's on the bottom while your crop is growing. Look at the substrate quality, quantity, look at the population dynamics of the oysters that are down there. How many are living? Do you have any stress points? Are you having disease problem? This sounds familiar this year. You have predation problems. How can we ultimately improve survival, increase harvest, and reduce the growing time, and reduce the cost of labor and fuel? This is a business. How do you make more money at it? And this is what S3AM is doing. There's a lot of robots that are out there. There are a lot of things that you can use and put underwater. You can see this one is a commercial operation where you can get all sorts of different devices to stick on it. But one of the problems that we face when we're trying to work out there in the bay is visibility, right? It's not the Virgin Islands. You know, we don't have 300-foot visibility. We're lucky and sometimes in the summer to see that far. So what the folks have been doing is developing the technology that can put a drone down. Ultimately, our concept is to have a drone that could be programmed for your bottom lease, that could go down and run it, just tell you how many live and dead oysters you are, what the population dynamics, what your growth rates are, distinguish areas where you may be having predation problems, look at sediment size and quality, and a range of things with organisms and stresses. It's been a great group to work with so far. They've done a lot with simulating oyster segmentation so far. This is a title of the folks who are involved with this one project, where you can correctly recognize live and dead oysters. Not an easy thing to do, especially down there on the bottom. I've worked with Matt Gray over at this sail lab and some of the tanks there, and then taken this and put it underwater. And ultimately to be able to really program these and come up with good data for somebody growing oysters. Adam with Fraunhofer has already come up with a thing called Find My Oyster, which is farm management software, where you can start putting your information into this. He's pilot testing this with some growers right now. And then ultimately we can hook that up with some of the drone technology that'll give you a lot better information constantly on your bottom lease, very much like farmers have then on their terrestrial crops. We've looked at other areas to go off into, and one of them we tried about a year ago. Matt Gray, who's over here, came up with a really nice one called it was a future project to do water quality monitoring. He had songs that he put around in areas of the bay. And one of the concepts we had was, could you take these and put them on one corner marker of each lease in Maryland? It would send that data back. It would monitor DO, temperature, turbidity, chlorophyll, send it back to a central point. You could pull it up on a notebook computer, see what was happening in the bay away from you, your tributary, down to your lease. When we first started working with this, I thought, yeah, a lot of my growers are going to think this is way far afield. Everyone I talk to, when's it going to be ready? It's really interesting technology. One of the other areas we will be moving in the future is smart harvesting. I hate the towed oyster dredge. The little picture in the top there, that's my engineers who, you know, they like to think outside the box and things. I refer to that as R2-D2 in little white boots. No, it's not going to look like that. But what could we do? These are some of the other things that are out there in our different artist conceptions. Is that there's got to be better ways to harvest oysters than a towed oyster dredge. Dexter Haven at VIMS, early 1970s, took a Maryland clam harvester, took the hydraulic head off it. It blows a foot deep trench in the bottom, and replaced it with a head that had rotating tines, like a soybean combine. Would rake the oysters back onto the belt. You'd sit there, you pick off what you want, the rest of them to go back over on your lease. The neat idea, I don't know why that never went anywhere. I finally dug the publication out and passed it around to folks. But you know, what could you take something like that? I mean, my vision is maybe you could take that, design a vessel that would have one 8 feet wide, 10 feet wide, with sensors that might be able to tell the oysters and remove the ones that you want, and everything else goes back over the side. The technology is there for this industry to develop, but this is one of the places we're going to be going in the future, looking at smart harvesting, where we'll be doing this in the future. We're developing a lot of the field work with it right now. We're actually going out next week to look at some of the things, but how would you do this? You know, drag your harvest equipment to where it would help you. Things like this, we've looked at other process, and this is what you're looking at. You know, are there places in your lease where you have more oysters? Obvious, most leases are not perfectly graded with the amount of oysters on. Rather than just towing around in circles, can we identify where your oysters are, put you there, let you harvest them? As I said, the towed dredge, I have an undying hatred for. I had one of my growers one day, we were in a conversation. He said, towed dredge is a pretty good piece of equipment. I went, I've been to your home. It's beautiful. You don't have an outhouse for sanitary purposes. Your wife doesn't have a hand pump in the kitchen. She's not cooking on a wood stove. That's 1830s technology. That's when the dredge got here. I went, yeah, you could be right. I said, furthermore, Jim Wesson showed in Virginia. It kills small oysters and it spreads out the important bottom substrate. Yeah, I've heard that. So it's I said, how big is your dredge? 3.5 feet wide. Why? Because that's what the Maryland legislature told the sailboats they could use in the last century. If you got a 300 or 400 horsepower boat towing this thing, it makes as much sense as somebody planting the wheat fields of Kansas would walk behind rototillers. And yeah, you're right. We got to come up with a better way to do this. So this is some of where we're going. This project we have also has some neat components to it. We're engaging our underserved students. Yanwei Jin, who's at University of Maryland Eastern Shore, our 1890 institution, has part of this project for students to try to get them involved, not only with the oyster industry, but with the high technology. One of the other very, very interesting portions of it has brought our 4-H component into this. Maryland has one of the top 4-H robotic programs in the country, and we have moved it underwater. We now have it so that there are do-it-yourself kits that kids can have to build remotely operated vehicles to work underwater. And they have really got, so this, you're trying to interest them in technology as well as oysters, aquaculture. So this has been really, really great to work with. It's all bound together by our extension component. And the folks that were, if you look at these photos, the top left is the one where we initially took Meow and some of her crew out with one of our growers, looking to see what oyster leasing was really like and oyster growing. And then working with some of the students that have been involved with these projects down there and in the bottom center. We've had students from College Park come out. In the upper right picture, we've had them playing with a remotely controlled underwater drones. They just love that. And then we've had some conferences. Matt Parker did one, the Seed to Dollar Sign Conference that was at the Bay Foundation office in Annapolis. And then we always do programs at the Waterman Show in Ocean City every January. So this has been a really great project to work with. Really, the folks I'm working with are just great people. And hopefully we're going to make some real progress in the future. I want to see, I tell my growers, I want to see Wendy's, Popeyes, and Burger King fighting over who's got the best oyster sandwich. And I want to see Chick-fil-A's prime competitor across the street called Oysters R Us. Have at it, gang, and thank you.
Thank you, Don. Really cool stuff there. So I think we've got a good amount of time, right, for questions we can take. Do you want to start off with the room or Zoom? Start. All right, we're gonna give the room preference first, so. Can be questions for any of our panelists, and if you don't ask them, I've got a bunch here too, so. Looks like Mike beat you to it, Ben, sorry. Yeah, just by a second.
First, Stephanie. Hi, Stephanie. The calcine marking. So you said you didn't use it on the bigger one. Is it expensive, time consuming, both?
Yeah, there's a number of issues. One is, at least for a while, we're not sure how long this will be, but the effluent from it, you have to handle in a very particular way. And as you scale up the amount of water that you mark the larvae in water. So that's a big issue. The other issue to some extent is practicality of finding them again at all, right? Because again, the mark it persists for at least a while. We've been, this is really Jason Spire's work. We've been growing oysters alongside a dock to see how long, you can still perceive that mark, but it's tiny, right? So there's a lot of interest in things like, oh, we could use this to ground truth models of like broodstock movement and that kind of stuff, larval transport models, but finding that again anywhere is tough. So there's some scaling issues with it for sure.
Great. I guess we will take one from Zoom if there is one.
This question is for Steve. What is the anticipated cost to purchase a plant this size and the labor cost to run it for 12 months?
That's a good question. So it's a question we often get. Can you hear me on this microphone? Yeah. Okay. So we've gotten a lot of inquiries about it, and the short answer is the cost is going to depend because it depends on the ultimate use. We've had folks that have said, I want something that has more ladders. I want something with fewer ladders. I need something because of my location. I can't go that deep. We've had folks that say that they see a use for this in essence as a nursery that would be tied to their pier. If they're a grower, they use it to grow to a certain size and then deploy their stock out on their farm. The best way to answer, I think, to think in orders of magnitude is this would be something, Don was great in his presentation showing some modern technology. So this would be like a land-based farmer paying for a tractor or a combine. So that gives you kind of a sense of the upfront costs. We're continuing to, and this is one of the reasons why, and one of the values of being able to deploy this on a lease next year is to really take a close look at those labor costs. And certainly Jordan and Johnny and their team will be able to really give us some really good data to really compare the labor cost savings. So again, prototype, we're still testing it out, but that's kind of where we are right now in terms of those questions.
Okay, great. I think Ben had a question in the room here. Can you wait for the mic one sec? Just thank you.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Ben.
So you showed a bunch of places along the Eastern Shore where it's either been deployed or you're planning on deploying it. first off, are those all in sanctuary or mixed, different types of uses? And secondarily, is there interest in Western Shore, Western Shore tributaries and that sort of thing? So I'd love to connect up later and talk about, potentially the Severn as well.
Well, yeah, so absolutely, they're talking about it later. And it's coincidence that they're all Eastern Shore. In fact, until you just said that, that didn't even occur to me. So sure, there's interest throughout. We need to be working someplace where it's likely that in any given summer, you're going to get good salinity conditions for setting, obviously, that. But so we're a little bit limited in terms of that, but the interest for sure is everywhere. And it's not just the map that I showed at the end. That's not just sanctuary bottom. There's one that is working with actually the commercial harvest community. Again, Jason Spires is mostly the lead on that particular deployment, and then one that's at Poplar Island, which isn't necessarily sanctuary, but not real harvestable because it's on a stone wall. So, and then the others are sanctuary. So it's a mix.
We have time for maybe a question or two more. Anything on Zoom?
Yeah, this question is for Don. Won't optimized dredging further decimate wild harvest beds just as the patent tongues did at the beginning of the century?
Won't it decimate? No. I mean, we're looking at this used for massive bottom culture of oysters. So you would have higher populations in the bay. I look at it as being, the parallels would be the poultry industry. I'm post World War II baby. I grew up in the New York market. I remember my mother showing me, chickens hanging in the butcher's windows, and then started to see companies like Purdue get in the market. So the poultry industry advanced tremendously. Why couldn't we do that with oysters? Companies having hatcheries, providing the technology to go and survey the grounds, contract growers. I look at this as being high volume, low unit cost, mechanized processing, value added products, mass distribution. We can do it. I'd like to see 100,000 acres in lease just in Maryland.
All right. Well, I think that concludes the time we hope. Sorry. You said wrap. Oh, okay. So keep it going. Yeah. Okay. Well, like I was gonna. Does anybody have anything in the room? Yep, over there.
Hi, this is a question for Stephanie on the direct setting. When you scaled up and you didn't really know what happened, right? It made me think of, are there predators out there that are just eating them? And who would they be?
Yeah, well, for sure, predation could be an issue. It still feels a little surprising that we put a lot of larvae down there and that we didn't see really virtually any signal. So predation could happen. Again, we track the current, so we don't think they just washed away. We have some theories. Again, one is that maybe and it could well be predation. We may never know. But we also got a natural spat set, so that may have overwhelmed any strong signal that we would have seen, which we knew was a risk. It was like one of the 2 years in recent memory we've gotten a decent spat set in that neck of the woods. So that for sure could have been a factor. We also, it's possible that benthic sled, the Medusa that we designed, spread the larvae a lot farther than we realized. We don't really have a sense of, when you're really using that in the field, how far that larvae gets spread out. So it may have spread it out to the point where it's just not detectable. But yeah, we may never know, but for sure that's a reasonable theory that predation had to do with it as well.
Okay, great. Well, I think we're right on time here, guys. How about another round of applause for our panelists this afternoon?